When I talk about warrior, I don't mean aggressiveness or, going out and hurting people or anything like that. I don't even really mean war. What I mean is basically going to war against your inner rivals. And that's everything that's trying to limit you, stop you, slow you down, keep you from taking that risk, keeping you from asking for forgiveness or letting something go. All of these inner rivals, we have to, at some point in time, kind of declare war on them in order to do what I believe we're supposed to do, which is to live our life to our absolute fullest. And I don't think we can do that if we're kicking our own butt. So that's what I mean by war. And I will tell you that both of my sisters followed in my mother's footsteps. They both became drug addicts at a very young age while they were still teenagers. They both just lived very destructive lifestyles. One of them spent most of her adult life in prison. The other one died young. But, if you would have asked my two sisters when they were both still alive, if you would have said, how did your lives turn out so terribly? And they did turn out very terribly. They would have both looked at you and with all the conviction and passion of their faith, they would have said, well, it's easy. My mother was a heroin addict. If that same person would turn and look at me and say, Chris, how did your life turn out so wonderfully? I would say, well, that's easy. My mother was a heroin addict. It was just all about perspective.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about self-mastery, focus, and overcoming adversity. I'm delighted to welcome Chris Harris. Chris is the president of Tech Labs and the founder of The Warrior Maker. He is a best-selling author, elite performance keynote speaker, a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and business executive for national security, and an inductee in the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame. You can reach Chris at his website, chrisharrisllc.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Chris. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
I am too. And I love you are the Warrior Maker, and you teach and train elite forces. And I love that when you teach correct principles, it goes beyond one area of expertise and it ends up being applicable all over the place. And you use it in business. And I know it's not just to beat up your adversaries. There's got to be something else. So do you want to help explain how that transfers over?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was given the name The Warrior Maker from clients many, many years ago. I spent about 25 years teaching special forces around the world. And I did a lot of work for U.S. allies as well. And I was overseas working on a contract, training some elite tier 1 special forces. And it was actually a very high ranking military official who was also a member of the royal family. And he said, you are, anytime you are in my country, you will be known as the one who makes warriors. You are the warrior maker. And that name just, it stuck for all these years. So it wasn't a name that I gave myself, but it's definitely one that I was very honored by being given that name. But, when I talk about warrior, I don't mean aggressiveness or, going out and hurting people or anything like that. I don't even really mean war. What I mean is basically going to war against your inner rivals. And that's everything that's trying to limit you, stop you, slow you down, keep you from taking that risk, keeping you from asking for forgiveness or letting something go. All of these inner rivals, we have to, at some point in time, kind of declare war on them in order to do what I believe we're supposed to do, which is to live our life to our absolute fullest. And I don't think we can do that if we're kicking our own butt. So that's what I mean by war.
That is so fantastic. And I was really hoping that we would end up going in that direction eventually. There are so many people in this world who are afraid, and we're afraid of all sorts of things that are on the outside, things that we have no control over. And it leaves people feeling helpless and hopeless. And when you say, and here you are, the warrior maker, that the real enemy is within. And that is something that each and every one of us now has some power to do something about. And that, I don't know, it gives us hope. It helps us feel like there's some form of control that we have. When if it feels like everything is on the outside and we're just this little plastic bag floating in the wind, then there's nothing we can do. And so
Hmm.
this is empowering. And I'm so grateful that you're going to talk about that. So thank you. Can you help us to be able to figure out what, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about what the enemy is, and that's our fear. And how
Well,
do,
it's irrational fear.
thank
Fear in
you.
itself is actually a good thing. I think fear is designed to be our counselor, and I think if we listen to it and look at it in the form of intuition, in the form of the best parts of our subconscious mind, fear is actually there to protect us and to lead us and guide us. But it becomes irrational fear when it goes from being our counselor to being our jailer.
Ooh,
And so I'm talking about irrational fear. Fear in itself is a gift, just like awareness is a gift. And so, and I would define irrational fear is any fear that has a very low probability of happening. So if it has a low probability, it's irrational. It's also irrational if you are not going to take any action to change the outcome. If you're just going to sit there and let that fear, maybe it does have a high likelihood or probability of happening. But if you're just going to sit there and let it ruminate rent free and not take any action to change the outcome, then it's just as useless or worthless as an irrational fear.
that is an interesting insight. So even if our fear is rational, we're afraid of something that is real, something that is a likely threat, but we don't do anything about it, then that fear loses that positive benefit, and now it's just a monkey on our back. It's not doing anything.
It's no longer an asset; it's now a liability. I mean, fear is supposed to motivate us to take action.
Wow. It's supposed to motivate us to take action. That
Absolutely.
is, and yet I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone else word it quite that way.
I had a friend of mine who was so afraid. We were in an economic downturn. It was back in like the 2008 era. And, times were tough financially. The economy was rough. A lot of people were losing their homes. And he was so afraid of him and his wife losing their home. He was afraid of losing his job. And then he was afraid if he lost his job, he would lose their home. And it was their first new home that they had ever built, and bought, that no one else had lived in. And I just remember, like, you couldn't have a conversation with him without him talking about losing their home. And I remember asking him, so what are you doing to reduce the chances of losing your home? And he said, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, let's talk that through. Let's walk through this. What do you mean there's nothing you can do? And he's like, well, it's the industry I'm in. I mean, everyone in my industry is facing layoffs and closures and all sorts of. Okay, so can you switch industries? Well, yeah, but then I would have to start all over. Okay, but can you switch industries? And just really reverse engineering the conversation to where at the end of a 5-minute conversation, he came to the realization that he had a lot more choices and a lot more power than he chose to admit. And as a result of that conversation, he went back to school and he got a degree in a completely different field. And now here he is years later, and he's an executive in a brand new industry that he never saw himself in, living in a home that's twice as beautiful as the one he was afraid of losing. But that's the power of irrational fear. And when we unwind it and reverse engineer it, we realize that we have a lot more power than we acknowledge.
Wow. Thank you for that example. That was fantastic. And what a beautiful ending where you go from that fear of I'm going to lose my home to becoming more and having more. That's a total win-win scenario.
Mm-hmm. But most of what I do is at its foundation is built around mindset. And if I were to ask a room full of leaders or business owners or entrepreneurs, raise your hand if you understand the importance or the value of mindset in as it relates to your success. Just about everybody would raise their hand, Linda, saying, "Yeah, absolutely. Mindset's very important. It's critical. It's vital." But if you were then to ask people, okay, now raise your hand if you can clearly articulate the difference between mindset, attitude, and belief. And the hands go down very quickly. So mindset is very misunderstood. It's one of those things where most people understand its importance, but very few people can articulate where does it differentiate between attitudes and beliefs. Because the difference between attitudes, beliefs, and mindset are the difference between night and day. So I define mindset in its simplest definition, and I'm probably oversimplifying it here, but if you were to take a look at that space that lives in our subconscious mind, and when I say subconscious mind, I'm talking about the portion of our mind that lives outside the conscious mind. Okay. So the conscious mind, that's about 5% of what's going on throughout the day, right? That's the analytical mind. But about 95% of our thoughts, our emotions, our decisions, our reactions, our responses, those happen outside of the conscious mind. Those happen in what we consider the subconscious mind. So that's where 95% of who we are and what we do and our habits, good, bad, or indifferent, that's where they come from. So mindset is this. It is what happens between the stimulus and either your response or reaction to that stimulus. That space, the stimulus, let's say somebody says something to you very rude or inappropriate, or they cut you off in traffic, or they insult you or criticize you, whatever you choose, whatever you want to be the stimulus. And the space between that stimulus and how you choose to respond and or react to that stimulus, that space is mindset. So what I'm really talking about is mastering that space.
That's fantastic. Okay, so now I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl. I'm thinking of Man's Search for Meaning. I'm thinking of when everything else is gone, the one thing that we have is that choice, the choice to respond. And that space between the stimulus and the response, you're saying, is our mindset. Wow.
And Linda, and I love that book, by the way, and Viktor Frankl's, that work really touched my life in my 20s. But, the bottom line, my main takeaway from that book is it's really about the journey. The journey is the point. But I would say that in that book and the point that he tried to make, I would like to add two other my kind of heroes of the faith to Viktor Frankl's work. And one would be Carl Jung. And Carl Jung, famous philosopher, psychologist, actually more psychologist than philosopher, but he said, until you can make the subconscious mind conscious, he said, it will continue to rule your life, control your life, and you will call it fate.
That takes so much unknown, so much that I have no power over fate. I have no power over fate. I have no choice over fate. But we do, but we're not even aware of it.
We absolutely do. But he says, until you make the subconscious conscious, in other words, until you become aware of your subconscious mind and how much it's actually controlling in the background, he said, until you do that, it will control your life and you will continue to call it fate or blame it. You'll blame it on fate. And then the second quote that I absolutely love, and this is from a British philosopher, I think he said it back in the 70s, by the name of Alan Watts. And I absolutely love this. I probably recite it or quote it probably 2 times a day. But he said, we are under no obligation to remain the same version of ourselves we were 5 minutes ago.
Ooh.
And if that's not a call to continuous improvement, I don't know what is.
The word obligation is fascinating.
We are under no obligation to remain the same version of ourselves we were 5 minutes ago.
It is a normal, natural human response to think what happened to me in the past is my present, will be my future. And that's just the way it is. It's written in the stars. It's fate. There's nothing I can do about this. And here he's saying, not only do you have the power to move forward, but the word obligation is just catching me. It's like we feel like we're supposed to continue to be what we were before. And this is permission to say, no, you don't. You don't have to stay the same.
I remember sitting at the dinner table with some friends, and we were at a very nice restaurant, and it was a very expensive meal. And I mean, it was just top shelf all the way across the board. But I remember there was someone one of our guests that was at the table who wasn't even halfway finished with their steak and just put a napkin over the top of their steak, a very expensive steak, by the way, and then just pushed it forward as if I'm done. And I remember one of our friends that was at the table was giving this person a hard time. Like, I can't believe you're going to waste that. That's like an $80 piece of filet mignon. I can't believe you're going to waste that. And this person, with all the composure and poise and confidence, just very quietly looked up and said, you should never have to recover from a meal. And I'll never forget that. And what he was saying is, I'm comfortable right now, but if I take another bite, I'm not going to be comfortable. And he said, you should never have to recover from a meal. And that just really stuck with me for a long time, because I was raised in poverty. And, you were taught you had to eat every bite that was on your plate. And, someone was always going to tell you about the starving children in Africa and, the kids who, would do anything just to have, the amount that you're wasting. And so there was this obligation to clean your plate and don't leave anything on your plate. And if you did, then you were being ungrateful and you were being wasteful. And I remember this person just putting the napkin over the, uneaten steak and saying, you should never have to recover from a meal. And I thought, I want to have that kind of composure and self-confidence and self-control one day.
Right. And it's not the what, it's the why. It's not the very act of putting the napkin over the steak and saying, I'm not going to eat this. It's the reason behind it. I have the confidence that I know what is working for my body. I know what I'm comfortable with. And that's what I'm going to do.
And I'm done.
And I'm done. Mm. And that you can take that same truth, that same confidence, and apply it anywhere, in any circumstance. So that is beautiful. So you were raised in poverty. How was your upbringing? Was that the only issue that you struggled with, or?
Well, let me say that I look at my childhood as a tremendous advantage. I think that it gave me such an advantage, and it still does to this day. But when I was 10, my mother was a heroin addict and a heroin dealer. And when I was 10, I had two sisters. One was 11, one was 12. My mother was sent to prison. And my two sisters were taken away when my mother was arrested. My sisters were taken to in one vehicle by Child Protective Services, and I was taken in another vehicle. So they went to the girls' home, I went to the boys' home, and we never lived under the same roof again. And I will tell you that both of my sisters followed in my mother's footsteps. They both became drug addicts at a very young age. While they were still teenagers, they both just lived very destructive lifestyles. One of them spent most of her adult life in prison. The other one died young. But, if you would have asked my two sisters when they were both still alive, if you would have said, how did your lives turn out so terribly? And they did turn out very terribly. They would have both looked at you, and with all the conviction and passion of their faith, they would have said, well, it's easy. My mother was a heroin addict. If that same person would turn and look at me and say, Chris, how did your life turn out so wonderfully? I would say, well, that's easy. My mother was a heroin addict. Perspective. It was just all about perspective. Same circumstances, same home, same mother, same abusive lifestyle, all of these things, but we chose to view it from a completely different perspective. Now, so for several years, I was homeless, but I will tell you, I chose to be homeless. Anytime the weather, I lived in Dayton, Ohio, and anytime the weather was cooperative, I would run away from the boys' home or the foster homes, and I would go live on the streets, and I would sleep under the bridges and eat out of the dumpsters. But that was my choice. Because I liked having the autonomy. I liked having the freedom. We had a saying back then in the boys' home: it's better to be wanted dead or alive than not to be wanted at all. And, so you think about some of the stupid petty crimes we would commit, like breaking into someone's car to steal a pair of sunglasses that we would never wear. But if someone, like a counselor from Child Protective Services or a police officer would say, Chris, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And but our belief was, I would rather be wanted dead or alive than not to be wanted at all. In other words, any attention's better than no attention. And so I chose to live on the streets. And then when winter came, Midwestern weather, and it became unbearable, I would always, borrow a dime from someone on the street and put it in the payphone. And I had my counselor's number from Child Protective Services. I had it memorized, and I would dial that number and say, here I am, come get me. It's getting cold. And then as soon as spring would come around, I would just run away again. But that was my choice. But I look back to my childhood years, and I just think of all of the advantages and all the really cool perspectives, that it gave me. And I wouldn't change any of it. I really, I would not want to have to compete against me because of all the experiences I've had. I just think that I really think that, I just kind of lived a blessed life because of all of the things that I got to experience. I think it made me a better husband. I think it made me a better parent. I think it made me a better employee. I think it makes me a better friend.
Wow. Okay. So I volunteer at our local jail, and I spend one-on-one time with inmates, and I get to hear their stories and try to help them to be able to break the cycle of just recidivism, where you just go and you come back and you go and come back. And I cannot wait to tell them your version of why you are successful, because I have heard so many times those same reasons being the reasons why they are where they are. Did you ever end up in jail? Was that part of your story, or never?
No. By the time I was in, I think, eighth or ninth grade, I just moved around from foster family to foster family. But by the eighth or ninth grade, I'd been in like 13 different schools. And I just finally decided in high school, like, I'm staying here with this family. I don't care what happens. I'm staying here with this family. I'm going to graduate from this high school. I'm done moving. I don't care how bad it gets. And on my 18th birthday, I was a senior in high school. My birthday gift to myself was I went to the local military recruiter, and I enlisted and raised my right hand and swore my oath. And then a few months later, I actually graduated high school. So I was still in high school, but I was 18. I was able to enlist. And then a few months later, I graduated high school and went straight off to boot camp. And then after I got out of the military, I became a private contractor, teaching military special forces for 25 years, traveling the world. So, no, I oftentimes I look back, I can look back into my past, and if I choose, I can find as much trauma as the heart can bear. If I wanted to, I could find blame. I could find excuses. I could find trauma. I could find PTSD. I could do that, and I would be justified in doing that. But I also can look back, and I can find resilience. I can find a young boy with an indomitable spirit. I can find a heart of gratitude. I can find all the people that love me, that owed me nothing, but chose to help this kid that they owed nothing to. I can find all the times that I should have died or should have went to jail or should have got injured and wasn't, almost as if like I had a guardian angel just following me around, tapping me on the shoulder, saying, no, turn left, young man, don't turn right, turn left. And, I don't know, why one person makes it out and why the other person doesn't. Two kids growing up in the same exact household, same circumstances, same environment. And one chooses to say, that is what broke me. And the other chooses to say, that is what made me. I don't know the reason behind that, but I do know that I chose a perspective of gratitude, not one of debt. And I think that made all the difference.
Gratitude versus debt. What do you mean by debt?
Well, debt means either I feel like I owe someone something or I feel like someone owes me something.
Oh, okay. Someone owes me something. Okay.
If you believe you owe someone something,
Like
if you ever met, have you ever met a kid that has a chip on their shoulder?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's usually because they feel like someone owes them something or they owe someone something. And what they believe they owe, it could be, um, someone maybe told them, hey, you're never going to amount to anything. Oh, I'm going to prove you wrong. Okay, well, the fact that you think you need to go prove that person wrong, that's debt. The books aren't settled between you and that person, you and that feeling, you and that belief, you and whatever's haunting you. So if you believe that you've got to prove something to someone, well, that's emotional debt.
Fascinating.
I don't owe anyone anything other than this. This is what I owe. And that is I have an obligation to extend love if it's within my power to extend it. That's an obligation I have. And so I would encourage anyone who's listening, never withhold love if it is within your power to extend it to another. It's a
Wow.
superpower.
It is. That is a superpower. Okay. So I'm thinking back about what you said before and about the quote from Viktor Frankl, how he says, okay, everything can be taken from you, but this, and that is your choice to respond. So when you're saying we have two different children in the same family, exact same circumstances, that is the stimulus. And the response is to go to the right, to go to the left.
The
What am I going
response
to
is
do
either
with
the
this?
the response is either because my mother was a heroin addict, or the response is because my mother was a heroin addict. Look, the gift is not just in the response. The gift is in the heart that is tied to the response. Because my sisters and I both gave the same verbal response, but there
Right.
was a different intent in our words.
The words could be the same, but your actions, your attitude, your mindset. And I loved how you pulled it to your heart. And even as you said that, my mother was a heroin addict, and put your hand kind of on your heart. Our mindset and our heart are very interconnected, don't you think?
Well, I honestly believe, and I'll just talk about the Bible for a minute, and not because I'm pushing Christianity or religion, but because the Bible is the most widely distributed book in the world. I think with over 5 billion copies distributed worldwide, I think it's something that can easily be cited with confidence. But if you were to look at the Bible from the perspective of every time it uses the word heart, because it uses the word heart a lot, I believe that there's a case to be made that anytime the Bible uses the word heart, I believe it's talking about our subconscious mind.
I like that.
And I would challenge anyone to, next time you have a Bible nearby, just look up the word heart. On your computer, find any scripture, any address in the Bible that uses the word heart, and just pick something random and go there. And when you read that passage or that scripture or that verse, read it out loud and replace the word heart with subconscious mind and see if it fits.
That's fascinating. I'm looking forward to trying that out.
But we have we are mind, we are body, and we are spirit. And when we say we are mind, I believe our mind is both our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. Okay, I believe we're both. And then when we talk about spirit, that's completely different. And then of course body, I think we can all agree what body is. But if you truly are going to master mindset, master that space between stimulus and response, which is where mindset lives, which it lives, in my opinion, lives in the subconscious mind. If you are truly going to master that space, I believe you have to come at it from the approach to where you are working on your spiritual self, your physical self, and your mental self. Because I believe if you neglect any one of those three, mindset will pay the price. I don't think you can be mentally tough if you neglect one of those three.
We are multifaceted. We are all of those things. We are not just one.
We are all. and we need to take all of them seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who sits around and works on the intellect and reads books and learns things and explores new languages and you know and they have all of that, but they do nothing to take care of their physical self. They're imposing limitations, and I don't think one of those three is more important than the other. I think they should all be looked at as as part of the same whole. What is the saying that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole? And I think when we look at wanting to improve ourselves, which I believe is our greatest responsibility in this lifetime, is to develop ourselves to become the best version of ourselves that we can become. But the reason I believe that's our greatest responsibility is I believe that we have a responsibility to transcend ourselves. And by what I mean is take that knowledge, those gifts, those talents, take those things that we've earned, that we've learned, that we paid the price for, and we have a responsibility to pay them forward, to throw down the rope. And I'm always looking for opportunities to throw down the rope. And what I mean by that is, I mean, if there's an area of your life that you've kind of, got a little higher than most, you got something figured out when it comes to something in your life. Well, when you're at that pinnacle, I think we have a responsibility to throw down that rope. And I don't think we should pull the person up. I think there's a lot of problems that come from that because,
Mm-hmm.
the power and the beauty and the gift is in the struggle. So I'm going to throw down the rope and I'm going to hold it. And I'm not going to pull it for you, but I will hold it firmly. And I will encourage you hand over hand every step of the way. And I will applaud you. And when you make it to the top, I will celebrate with you. And there's more than enough room for both of us at the top. But I believe that our number one responsibility in this lifetime is to develop ourselves to the fullest of our potential and ability so that we can throw down the rope more often.
What a beautiful, beautiful analogy. And I love that you also clarified that throwing down the rope does not mean that you do it for them.
Yeah,
We
there's a lot
don't.
of danger in that.
Right.
You got to let that baby chick crack that egg.
Right. And if they don't, they die.
And if they
If they
don't, they
don't, they're
die.
too weak to be able to
Mm-hmm.
survive. And that's a common mistake that caring people make, caring but short-sighted.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This has been so amazing. And I appreciate your wisdom and your insight so much. Um, this is just a light. The truth that you share is so helpful. Do you want to give us just a hint or two on some action step that we could take if we become aware and say, oh my gosh, I'm only consciously aware of 5% and 95% is unconscious, and I need to make the unconscious become conscious. Do you have what's my next step?
Yeah, I would encourage you to do a little research on the word meta, META, cognition. Uh, One word, metacognition. And metacognition is basically the art or the science of, or the practice of, however you want to view it, thinking about your own thinking. And it is the shortest path, the quickest path to self mastery. And that is and it goes so much further, Linda, than just self awareness. Self awareness is almost instinctual. We naturally have self awareness. But metacognition is when you think about your own thinking. And it's basically when you pause 100 times throughout the day, you just pause, and in a microsecond, you say, why am I thinking about that again for the fifth time today? And yet I've taken no action to change the potential outcome. Why am I ruminating about this? And when that's metacognition, it's taking a moment to think about your own thinking. And when you become mindful of your own thinking, what happens is you're now evolving at the speed of light. Every thought becomes a stepping stone to becoming a better version of yourself. So I would encourage people to, I think it's one of the highest forms of intelligence is people who can in real time think about their own thinking.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Never withhold love when it's within your power to give it.
Thank
It
you.
is your superpower.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Lao Tzu. He said, "Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power."
I
Today, I
love
invite our listeners to master ourselves and overcome our true rivals of inner doubts and fears. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.